Welcome back to another episode of the Mesa International Film Festival podcast. I'm your host, John Martinez, and with me is Natasha Kenny. And with us today is our good friend, John Kestner. For those of you in the Phoenix film community, you know John, you've seen John. We met at the Mesa Film Festival last year, and then John and I and Natasha were out in Hollywood out there, and then John was up at Sholo, and John is an incredible filmmaker, so it's going to be great to talk to him about it. He writes, he directs, and I even saw on his IMDb page he did a little acting. So it's going to be great to have John on. So, John, with that, how are you doing today?
Great, great. I was editing all day yesterday on a new film, and then tonight we're having a table read for the next one. So very
Nice.
keeping very busy.
Yeah, I was just looking at it, at your IMDb and seeing some of the works I saw was at the independent cross examination up at Sholo and then at Mesa, and now you have a new one out that's on the circuit. I see is doing successful and well, and you're winning awards for Best Actress and Actor in Blood Will Have Blood. So definitely excited to see that. But let me start back at the beginning. What made you want to become a writer or get involved in the film industry?
Well, I'm probably like a lot of kids that watched a movie on TV or in a theater and just felt like it was magic. You know, you were transported to another world. You saw something else. You saw something extraordinary or funny, and you just connected with that. So, and I spent my childhood in front of a television. I spent my teenage years in a movie theater and a drive-in, because drive-ins were a thing. I was kind of at the tail end of the drive-in era. So I have a lot of great memories of that too. So, a lot of my best memories are going to a movie.
And,
And I
and
seem to recall them very easily too. So
And just on that note, what was the one movie you saw in the theater where you really connected to and said, I would want to do that for a living? Is there one specific movie or TV show that you saw that kind of set you over saying, I want to do this like full time?
oh my gosh. Well, I think the first real traumatic and exhilarating movie I saw was 9 years old, begged my dad to take me to the Poseidon Adventure,
Oh,
and
okay.
that was my first grown-up movie, and we went on New Year's Eve. So we're in New and the movie is set on New Year's Eve. The tsunami hits the ship at New Year's Eve, and I'm 9 years old, and I probably should not have been at that movie because it was a very traumatic experience. It was because when you're as a kid, your ability to differentiate between reality and fantasy isn't established yet. So if you see something, as realistic to me and as compelling, because even as a kid, I was dreading. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know if you're familiar with the movie or not, but
Mhm.
it's about an ocean liner that capsizes from a tidal wave, and the survivors have to climb in an upside down ship to the bottom in the hope that they can cut their way out. And it's like, and there were so many things about the movie that I loved. And so that was the first one. I was at 9, and then I'd have to say Jaws when I was 12 was really devastating and exhilarating at the same time. I mean, it was just such an intense experience. And those are the two. I mean, there were others like Alien, and which came a few years later, and it's like, so I had associated very intense feelings with the movies. And I had a
And
very comfortable life as a kid growing up in Ohio. So, I just kind of bonded with film at an early age.
And and two, just on that note too, so you were a part of that generation that created that term blockbuster. Because I remember at Jaws, I was wondering, were you in a line for Jaws? Like, and because I remember when that came out, they just showed those pictures of it like wrapping around the blocks for people to come in. They
Yes.
just couldn't get
My
enough of
mother
it.
took it,
Yeah, I was gonna say fascinating
and it was
and great
everybody,
movie.
but just people everywhere. And we actually moved at one point because my mom went, I went, and two other people went. My brother was one of mine, I think one of her friends, and we had to sit separately. So we
Mhm.
would switch seats, because they were. we were in the front row and about halfway back. So some of the more terrifying moments, I'm in the front row. So further back, I remember it was in Dayton, Ohio, and there was a guy with a big afro, and I could hide behind the afro. So I can remember that. So
Well, at least there's no oceans in Ohio with
there's water,
shark. There's
there's
water, but
bathtubs, there's pools, there's creeks, there's rivers. It could get me. It could get me. So
it's very true. I like just talking about like the first really kind of like scary film. I think mine, from what I remember, was Silence of the Lambs.
oh, okay.
And I think I was like 9 or 10, and my mom just had it on, and I just happened to be downstairs, and I think I had nightmares. But
Oh
I
yeah, that
I
was
love
that.
that movie to this
Yeah,
day. It's one of the really good ones. But
it
so
is.
so it sounds like film and cinema were just it's kind of like built into your DNA, and you have so many awesome projects that are out, and you just keep pushing out to the circuit. My question to you is, so like as a kid, and then you're going like through your teenage years, and now you're an adult, how did you actually get into the industry? Did you just start writing? Because like you're a director,
Well,
you're a
yeah,
writer, you
I
wear
started
multiple hats.
writing. Really, all I could do in Ohio was write, and I went to film school for a year back there, and then I went to college for another year. And they didn't have an actual film program; they had a film department. So I was in literature. So I figured that's related storytelling. And then I had a chance to move out west and to get closer because back then it was you were either in LA or you weren't, and there was no way of being part of it unless you were there. So, and I ended up in Phoenix, and I ended up staying here for 40 years. So, and I like Phoenix. I like Arizona. I mean, I wouldn't have stayed here this long if I didn't. And and I was close enough to LA to where I could go. And I was just there a week or two ago, so I can go. I can't afford to live there, and I have a great job here that allows me to write and allows me to, still continue to pursue this. So and pay for it. And
That's
so,
the biggest
it
thing.
just it worked out to where I'm in a position now that I can make these short films. I can still write. I can, so to be able to do this still is a blessing. So, and I see it as that.
And John, on that note, what was the first story you wrote where you go, this is actually pretty good and I actually can hang with the big boys out west? What do you remember what that story was?
Uh, well, I mean, when you write something, you always think you think it's good because you worked on it, you did it, you came up with it. So yeah, you tend to think that, and then you start getting feedback, and s- and the first story I felt confident about wasn't until much later, and it was because of the feedback I got. So I just kept doing it until I did start getting good feedback. And it was a horror film. It was a horror script that I still have a feature based on some satanic killings in the Midwest. And when I did that one, and my brother said, hey, this is really good, and he'd never said that before. So when I started hearing other people say things, that's when I started feeling a little more confident about what I was doing. But I was always doing it, so it was just a matter of like, oh, eventually I'll. I mean, there's stories I love and keep going with, but I think that was one, and that was much later. I'd written that I don't know how many times before I got that. So it really depends on somebody else saying that to me. I don't know. I, I can do the best I can, but and I think sending things out to festivals and competitions and winning and it's validating. But until I see it and until something happens to where I'm making money from it, I'll just keep going.
And then so you started writing these stories, and you kept going. And when did you decide that you were going to start directing what you were writing?
Well, I've always wanted to do that, because when I was a kid, I thought it was in the 70s, and I think it started in the 60s. The French started the auteur theory, which was the director is the author of the film, and that was so I got swept up in that too. So I was reading up on the directors and watching their films and studying what they did. And you know, I'm in high school saying I'm going to direct movies one day. So it just took a long, long time to get there to where I actually did start doing that. But yeah, it started very, very early on. Everything started very early on. Just trying to figure out
And
how.
and John, when that was going on, who was the influences on you at that time when you were kind of get into it? Like who were you looking at saying, you know, I like their style of how they tell a story, whether it's a screenwriter, director, books. I mean, who were the influences in your life to help shape who you
Oh,
are today in filmmaking?
I'd have to say Stanley Kubrick would be number one. Although I would never do anything. I mean, I wouldn't direct the way he did because I just I it's funny because there's the mindset of wanting to be as a committed artist as Stanley Kubrick, but at the same time, once it becomes necessary to start making the film, then I start getting the mindset of Roger Corman. So I
Hmm.
mean, I have a lot of influences and people that I admired, and those two were so far away from each other. Because Kubrick made 13 feature films in his life, and he did everything on every single one of them, from the writing to the producing to the editing to the directing. And Roger Corman has hundreds and hundreds of movies, and he's spawned a whole generation of filmmakers, Francis Coppola and Martin Scorsese and all of them, by giving them jobs, Peter Bogdanovich. And he would hand them a poster and say, here, make this. Here's, 70 grand, or here's 50 grand. Go make this. This has got to play next month. And so, I mean, it's like, get it done, get it done. He's famous. Roger Corman is famous for making a movie in 2 days, a feature film. He did the original Little Shop of Horrors,
Wow.
and it had a 22-year-old Jack Nicholson in it, and
Oh wow.
it was in 1959. I believe it's on YouTube, so you could actually see it if you haven't. But it inspired the '80s musical with Rick Moranis
Hmm.
and Steve Martin, and so Roger Corman shot it in 2 days, and I got a chance to talk to the lead actress Jackie Joseph at a show, and I said, you're in this film that's famous for being shot in 2 days. And she goes, well, you want to know why it was shot in 2 days? I'm like, well, yes. And she said, it was shot on December 30th and December 31st, 1959. And new SAG rules went into effect January 1st, 1960. Roger would have had to have paid us more. So he's like, we're going to do this in 2 days. So the original Little Shop of Horrors, one of Jack Nicholson's first movies, was done in 2 days to skirt SAG rules, so he wouldn't have to pay as much.
Wow.
And so, but I love his drive and his, like, get it done, get it done, get it done. So you know, I, I try to be getting in one mindset at the writing level, and then another mindset at the producing level, then the ones that work. So I had a lot of influence. I mean, the '70s to me were the last golden age of Hollywood to grow up then. You had not just Kubrick, you had Coppola, The Godfather, Spielberg created the blockbuster, George Lucas, William Friedkin, his crazy path. I mean, to do French Connection, The Exorcist, Sorcerer, and then after that, like, just crazy films. Uh, Mel Brooks, John Landis, who did Animal House and American Werewolf in London. I mean, a name would, Joe Dante, a name would be enough for me to go, oh, I want to go see that because I want to see what they do with it. So there was a lot there. Scorsese, Bogdanovich. Yeah, I just did a lot of, you paid attention back then.
You know, it's interesting, John, with that, I was just seeing, I think it was on Instagram where I think Kubrick's in the Guinness Book World Records. He did 175 takes with Shelley Duvall in The Shining. I was just thinking 175 takes, but also too with Kubrick, I think he was trying to play the mind game with her to actually get that character portrayal out, but I was like 175 takes, and then, go to Roger Corman, like, that probably 175 takes was probably the 2 days that required to film the little
He probably did
shot by horse.
175 takes to shoot the movie.
Yeah, and
The
then
whole movie
with
was
Cor
175.
yeah, and then with Corman too, like, he had a Death Race 2000, young Stallone's in there,
Oh, sure.
David
He gave
Carradine.
he gave pretty much anybody a shot. Yeah, he just a lot of people came up through him. Nicholson, he financed the biker movies that Peter Fonda made before he made Easy Rider. Robert Towne, I believe. A really, to me, a really funny story is there's a movie called The Terror, and it's with Jack Nicholson and Boris Karloff,
Oh,
and
wow.
they were shooting The Raven. I don't know if you remember The Raven in the '60s with Vincent Price, Boris Karloff, and Peter Lorre. Jack Nicholson plays, I think, Peter Lorre's son in that movie. So they're shooting in England on these sets that Roger got a hold of that was for another legitimate studio film. And they're shooting The Raven. And Roger said, it's a shame that nobody's shooting here on the weekends. So he told Jack Nicholson, come up with something. We've got 2 days extra with Karloff. Just come up with something and shoot on weekends. So they did. And they came up with this incomprehensible horror movie called The Terror. And Karloff thought it was a lot of fun. I mean, he had a lot of fun. And they came back to the States and they had this footage. And so Francis Coppola was brought on and they were students then. So when I say, well, then they got Coppola. Well, Coppola was nobody. Nicholson was nobody. These guys were nobodies. And they had elderly actors like Boris Karloff. And so if you ever see The Terror, if you look it up on YouTube, because it's in the public domain, I believe. And I mean, I don't know if you can make any sense of it at all, but it's a costume horror film, uh, and it's uses these sets in England, and then the beach scenes were shot by Francis Coppola, and it stars Jack Nicholson, a very very young Jack Nicholson, and his then wife Sandra Knight. And it's like, so there's a movie that exists because Corman thought it was a shame the set was standing empty all weekend
Wow.
while they were shooting. And that's the kind of, business mind and just like, okay, I've got these young talented people who are dying to do this. And so yeah, it's he's Corman's someone who should be admired. I mean, can you point to any, great cinematic film? I don't know. I mean, I remember watching one of his films called Humanoids from the Deep at the drive-in in 1980, which is like one of the most outrageous monster movies I've ever seen. It's about big rubber monsters who are mutated salmon coming ashore to mate with human women. And it's a drive-in. It's a rubber monster movie at the drive-in. So, but I mean, is it a great movie? Well, it made for a great time. It's as memorable as anything else I saw then. So, I think I have the whole broad spectrum of the high end, which would be the auteurs like Kubrick and those guys. But then I also appreciate the grindhouse, the drive-in guys that just get something out and sometimes hit high art. So I love that, the whole filmmaking milieu back then. So
You're such a wealth of knowledge. Like every time I talk to you, and like I always just learn so much because you're just so knowledgeable in all of it. And you brought up a really good point that, and John and I, we've had this conversation with so many people that like back in the day, like you talk about the '70s and like when Jaws came out and The Exorcist, and even like in the '80s and the '90s, you have these movies that are so memorable and like, you just remember everything.
yeah.
And nowadays, like, there's movies that are coming out of Hollywood that are they're okay, they're good, like, I love the John Wick series, and I love, like, some of the new stuff coming out, but they're not as memorable as what they were, like, back in the day. Like, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think, a lot of people describe the death of Hollywood or the death of movies, and it started, I mean, my own feelings about it is that starting in the 80s, you had a lot of corporations buying up the studios. And in the 70s, you had this rare moment where the artists were running the studios, or if it was businessmen running the studios. And I always cite Robert Evans at Paramount because Robert Evans was responsible for Love Story, Rosemary's Baby, The Godfather, Chinatown. He knew these were great projects and he got great and actors to do them. And he chose for the studio the direction they went. And then in the 80s, what happened was you had a lot of corporations buying up the studios. And you went from someone who grew up or had a lot of experience in the film industry and storytelling, who were replaced by focus groups because a corporation owned the company now. And we had to go and the kind of endings that they're like, well, we have to change the ending because that's just too sad. We can't do that to an audience. It's like, well, why not? That's the story. And so there was a blandness that started creeping in to film in the 80s, and it just kept going. And I also have to say, I think nepotism and cronyism is just as deadly to Hollywood too, because everybody in front of and behind the camera is related to somebody in the business. So I had a script consultant who told me 15 years ago, she said, it's really sad in Hollywood now because there's nobody in movies who loves movies. They're just pumping out product. They're doing formulas. They're just like, well, what worked before? Well, do it again. Hire this guy. Well, I have a friend or I have a nephew that just got out of rehab, or my daughter would be great for this. And so you have nepotism, cronyism, corporatism, and it's just death by a thousand cuts. So and there's nobody there who loves movies and loves the whole thing enough. They're there for the money or the power or the prestige or the name or the networking or whatever. It's like, are you there to tell a great story? No, not really. So I that's my feeling about it, is because there is nothing. I mean, they were just talking locally on one of the local radio stations about how nobody quotes movies anymore. I mean, all of the quotes, we used to have this shared language that you could say, you're going to need a bigger boat, or Shirley, you can't be serious. Don't call me Shirley. And everyone knew what you were talking about. And I'm trying to think of anything in the last 15,
There's not
20
there's nothing
years
memorable.
that someone could say and everyone in the room got it. And we're still saying, sayings from, at old movies. So yeah, I think they've just depleted at every level in Hollywood what made Hollywood special. And go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, John, on that note too, where you're talking about is like you can go back to the 70s or 80s, and if I said, "Hey, can you tell me what Rambo First Blood is about?" I'm sure you can sketch out the whole movie, come up with a couple lines that was said. And if I asked you, a movie in the last 5 years, you're gonna be like, I mean, for me, I can remember movies from the 70s like Jaws. I can tell you probably frame by frame how that movie is gonna, or if you put a still on the TV and close my eyes, open up, say, "What movie is this?" I could tell you. I think now it's the sad thing is because I think was it last winter they were showing, I think in the movie theater was a remake of Nosferatu, 102-year-old movie. They
Yep.
decided to remake that. They had the Lion King movie out there. It was called something else, but in essence, it was a computerized story of the Lion King. And then you look at this, and the one thing that's interesting is with the festivals is you have all these great writers like yourself that tells these unique stories that actually, in my opinion, matter. You hear a new voice, but it also goes back to, I think, Hollywood with, well, the IP is the risk for them. Like they're going to remake now. I was just reading, and it tells you where the fear is now in the unknown of these stories. But now they're saying, no, we're going to remake Escape from New York. Why would you remake a classic like that? Or we're going to remake Christine. Why would you remake? I know John Carpenter's getting hit with Big Trouble in Little China, but the question now is like, you have all these studios that just want to remake it. But I think now it's like the last time I went to a movie, I can't remember. And then I remember there's a little picture it says it was 1987. It says, "What movie are you watching?" It was like Full Metal Jacket, RoboCop, Predator, and you see them on there, and they're all classics. But nowadays, you just get this minutia that's out there that I don't know if anyone really would to go see, and I think you're seeing that now with, movies like Backrooms and Obsession beating out The Mandalorian
Oh
on,
yeah.
like, a minuscule shoestring budget, but in my opinion, I think what's gonna happen is, like, in the late or excuse me, the early '70s, it was people like you mentioned, Coppola, Scorsese, Friedkin, that literally resurrect Hollywood from the ashes. Because I think at that time, before The Godfather, Hollywood was, like, on its deathbed. I think Paramount was just crumbling around,
They all were.
about
Fox, all of
yeah,
them.
about to fall apart, and it just take these courageous filmmakers who believed in, their story, and that's the big part, and to segue onto that, when it comes up to story, what goes through your mind when you're sitting down or you're doing a story pops up? Like, what is that process for you to get this idea going? I was just watching something on, Fury Road with George Miller, how he was saying he was crossing the street and he had the idea pop up in his head as he was walking across the street for Fury Road way back in the day. And it just started gestating, kept thinking about it. It's like it started just to bloom. Like, what is your process when it comes up to getting a good story out there?
But generally, it's like a what if is recognizing because I'm always looking, I'm always wondering, like, what would that, and something would come up, and it's like I have a script now that's winning awards, and I wrote it 20 years ago,
Oh, wow.
but it's called The Demo, and I just didn't do much with it, but it's a favorite of my script consultant and a couple friends, but it's about a mythical tape of Elvis Presley jamming with the Beatles. And when I was reading biographies of Elvis and I was reading biographies of the Beatles, they crossed paths once in August of '65. The Beatles came to Elvis's Bel Air home to meet him and they jammed in a room. And I thought, man, what would that be like to have a tape of the Beatles jamming with Elvis? And from that, and I'm like, and then what would somebody do to get their hands on it? So I came up with a whole story about the FBI following the Beatles and taping their every move, and they actually have this tape. And then 15 years later, that tape gets out, and everybody on the planet is trying to get their hands on it. So this is kind of a what if, just taking what you draw in every day, what you experience, and then just to have a curiosity. Well, what if this happened? Well, wait a minute. What if that? So a lot of stories come from that. And then, other stories are just things that you're interested in and fascinated by or hold an affection for or something like that. So just generally just having a curiosity about the world and what's in it and then what you can do with it to make it a good story.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I like we're like all writers, we're all creatives in our own different way, and it's so interesting to see like how you actually pull your stories. And the demo sounds really interesting. I really do hope that you make that so so we could go watch it. It sounds
Well,
fascinating.
it's a feature, so it's going to have to be somebody taking it and doing it.
Yeah, yeah. Features are definitely
Yeah.
they're a lot bigger and more complicated to make, especially in the indie circuit. And, you know, like in the indie circuit, it's so important for people like you and others and John, like the creatives, because we really are driving a lot of just films out there because Hollywood's really lacking. And my question to you is what advice do you have for somebody that wants to get into the industry? Like I'm an educator and I have kids that they do theater and they're in bands and they're just so creative. But how do you tap into that if Hollywood really isn't a place you could go to? Like what advice do you have for them to like take it and run?
Well, I 2 things really. For individually, I would say really get to know movies. I'm shocked at people who want to be involved in the film business and they know nothing about films. And you know, if you went to their house, there'd be the box set of the Transformer films, and that's it. They've never seen the great movies. They've never seen the great stories. And I mean, so they're unfamiliar with what made this such a special medium, and they don't know. So they're reinventing. They're doing more work by trying to reinvent the wheel. And if they had just had a good grounded education, and I mean by that I mean just exposing themselves and making themselves watch films to know what for them works and what doesn't. I mean, I mentioned Stanley Kubrick earlier, and he said he got into filmmaking because not because of great films, but because he saw horrible films and said, I could do better than that. So that's what got him into it. And then the other thing is if you're in any community at all, I mean, if you're in any city, I would think that every city probably has a film community in it now. I know Phoenix certainly does. And there's a lot of people that want, so go to the local film festivals, find groups that want to make films and get involved with them to see it. I mean, you know, be careful when you do that because there's a lot of people who do some really horrible things. And I don't just mean their movies, I mean their behavior. They think they need to be this way or that way because they're in movies. And but you know, there's ways of doing it now. And I mean, last week, you know, as you mentioned, two YouTuber movies beat a Star Wars studio film for box office. So ever since Blair Witch, you know, and Paranormal Activity, there's a feeling that to make a good feature film that can be distributed and make money is in anyone's hands if they come up with the idea and do the work and make it happen. So I would just say, like, no matter where you're at, you can do something and do something inside by studying and watching films and getting to know them, and then do something out by introducing yourself to local film people who want to try and get things going. I mean, the stuff that the people I work with, because I know nothing technologically about film. I just don't. I'm helpless when it comes to mechanical things, to technical things, and there's so many people who can do amazing things. I just spent all day yesterday doing a rough cut of the latest film with my DP and my editor and everything else, Roman Aguirre, and he is amazing. His work is just, it's so professional to go to. And Justin Moscow was the DP I had before him, and they know everything. And I've gone to see both of these guys work at the Chinese theaters in Hollywood, and it looks as good as anything a studio's making. And this is a guy living here in the Valley because they know how to light, they know how to film, they know how to edit, they know how to do the sound. So there's people out there that love that stuff. I'm not that person. I like to write the scripts and work with the actors and things like that. So there's people out there that you don't have to feel like you have to do everything. Just go with what you want, go with your strengths, and try to find the other people who can do everything else. And you have a team.
Yeah, John, that's fascinating. I was hearing something where Tom Cruise was saying he tries to watch one movie a day just to experience like what happened with that. And you'll get Sergio Leone when he was making those spaghetti westerns, looking at Kira Kurosawa to see some of that. And Quentin Tarantino's another one who watches, people just tell great stories. And then, then you borrow some of it, I'll put that in quotes, into your movie to do that. And there was an editor that was saying that he tries to watch 1 to 2 movies a day to do it. And I said, man, that's kind of tough to do it. But I mean, it's what he's claiming he does. But when you see that, you start to see the aesthetics of really great filmmaking. And if your film wants to be great, like you said, you can either reinvent the wheel or just realize there was a great filmmaker back in the 60s during the French New Wave or, in the 70s that actually did it. Like Friedkin, you brought up making a French connection, just him trying to break, I won't say rules, but it's everything was money. I don't have a film permit. I need to get the scene. We're going to be friends with the police officers, travel up 26 blocks as fast as we can. And that's the way, in my opinion, you remember those movies because of the risks they take, the chances they take, but also they're just brilliant filmmakers who have this mind's eye of what goes on there, like Tom Cruise in the Mission Impossible, for him to think of all of those things in Top Gun. I mean, he has that keen eye that knows the audience will be on the edge of the seat. And on that note, when it comes to storytelling, which is first and foremost the biggest thing, it shows you can have $165 million and make a Star Wars movie and no one will really go see it. But you make these other movies, that just came out, the YouTubers that show it. I think it shows like there's a hunger out there for people just to say, tell me a good story. Like I will pay whatever it is. I just want to tell or just to watch a good story. And when you're writing, how like what is your process on there? And I know when we were up in Shola, we were talking to some of the writers up there who had to pitch. It was fascinating to hear people's process when they write. Like some people say, "Oh, I actually map out the whole movie out and I just write it out." And for me, I don't do that. I think I know how it's going to start and how it's going to end. How we get there, I don't know. I mean, that's my process is actually to write a character that I think it's something that would be interesting to create. And I always think like if John Kestner is sitting on his couch, he has a remote control in his hand, he's scrolling through and he sees a title like, oh, that's a nifty title. Let me watch it. I figure I have 120 seconds to keep your attention before you're like, next, let me see what else is on out there and to build that way. I mean, that's my process. How would you describe your process in writing a good story?
As far as coming up with the story,
Yeah,
or
like when you're writing the latest, like, Blood Will Have Blood, when you're writing it, do you already know in your mind how, like, everything that's going to happen in the story? Or is
no,
it one of those things that as you're writing, you're like, "Oh, I want this to happen, and I know I want this to happen," but you have to build that bridge, how to get from, A
well,
to B.
blood will have blood, and I don't know if you've seen it or you know what it's about, but
We talked about I haven't seen it yet, but we talked about Up in Sholo.
yeah, it came about, and that came about because I had been doing I did another film with an actress that I didn't know. It was recommended to me, and she was wonderful, and she didn't have much to do. She was the daughter-in-law or the wife between her husband and father, and she didn't have much to do, but I was really impressed with her, and I asked her. We shot that film in one day. It was called The Next to Last Supper, and I said, "Hey, I wanna do another film, but I want you to have the prominent role. I want you to be the star of it. What would you like to do?" And she said, "Oh, I don't know. I'm kinda sick of playing wives and girlfriends." Done. And I said, so at the end of the day, I said, "Well, have you had a chance to think about it?" And she goes, "Probably nothing too ambitious, just something like Lady Macbeth." So I wanted to work with her. I She said she was sick of being a wife and a girlfriend, and she wouldn't want to play anything too ambitious, just like Lady Macbeth, which is incredibly ambitious, which is she's being flippant. And and from that, I started thinking, okay, well, what could I write for her that would do that? And I thought, wait a minute, I'll write something about a woman who's married, who used to act, she gave it up, she's going to come back, and she's going to do a local production of Macbeth, and she's going to play Lady Macbeth. And she finds out her husband's cheating on her. And this starts a dialogue between her and Lady Macbeth in the mirror, telling her how to kill her husband for cheating on her. And that's where that came from. That was the whole idea. So it was kind of, it's just having it, like I want to do this. Oh, there's an idea. Let's build on that. And I just kept writing it, and ultimately she didn't do the movie, and I went with Ellie Ringo, and she's wonderful. She's amazing. I don't know if you know Ellie or not, but
No, I
she's
saw she's winning, for her performance in that on the circuit, so yeah,
yes,
awesome
she's
stuff
won
by
over a
Ellie.
half a dozen Best Actress awards, Rome, Hollywood, and, oh, where's the other one from? It's from Europe, I think. But, yeah, she's doing she's getting a lot of attention, and then I'm getting it out there as much as I can for her. So, 'cause she was great. She was just wonderful. So yeah, so I don't know if that answers your question or not, but it was just building on something, just having an initial like, "Oh, what if we did this?" So, just building on that. And 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 it's going to change. It's going to change. That's one thing I found out. There was a big box of edition for The Shining that came out. Lee Unkrich, who was the director of Toy Story 2 or one of the sequels, and he also did Coco. But I didn't realize he's a bigger nut for Kubrick and The Shining than I am. And
Wow.
he had the website theoverlookhotel.com. I didn't know that was him. For years I'd go there to see what leaked out about The Shining for 20 years. There'd be a photo or a story or something. I didn't know that was Lee Unkrich, the filmmaker. And then he spent years putting together this giant box of, and there's a diary of the film of The Shining in there that's so meticulous. He had access to the Kubrick files and everything. And and Kubrick shot his films in order, the scenes in order, which usually you don't do. But he did that because he made changes as he went. So to me, what I learned from that is to have a fluidity about any story. So because growing up reading about what a rigid auteur and authoritarian he was, I thought he wrote a script and he followed that script. No, as it went, the ideas came and went. And the reason he shot a film for an entire year was because they were, as they went, made changes and thought of things. So have a fluidity and just always be working, always be redoing. And because if it's your story and you love it, you're going to care. So what happens in Hollywood is they hand it over to another writer, and that's when it goes off the rails because that writer has no connection to that story. But if the one person who came up with it and loves that story, he's going to protect it, and they're going to develop it. And if an idea comes in and says, he'll go, no, because that'll take it off this way, and it'll get it away from what it should be.
And
So anyway,
and
I'm
John, on
sorry.
that no, it was a great answer. On that note, though, I think we barely scratched the surface because there's like a ton of more things I want to talk about. And it's also great if we're ever in a bar and we're having movie trivia, you're on my team. I'll let you want to know that right off the bat. But we have time right now. And I was going to say, if you have time in the future, I would definitely love to have you back on to talk more because I definitely want to know more about the movies and everything else. But on that note, for everyone's John Kestner, check him out. He's going to be up in Flagstaff, coming up here locally for the festivals. I know John is around. Check him out on his social media. He has some incredible photos where he goes around to the places he goes, the events he goes to. It's quite fascinating. And again, thank you for everyone for listening to the Mesa International Film Festival podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, subscribe wherever you get podcasts. Leave a review, share this episode with a writer, filmmaker, storyteller in your life. Follow us online for our YouTube videos that we'll be posting. And until next time, keep writing, keep creating, and keep telling stories. Bye.
Thank you.